Welcome back to the Raising Our Vibration podcast, where we explore higher consciousness through spiritual practice. And our mission and purpose at Raising Our Vibration is to raise our collective vibration, to resonate with the finer frequencies of peace, love, and light, and live as boundless, compassionate awareness. And that relates directly to our topic today on the podcast, how to end the search for your true self. So what do we mean by this true self? And it relates to our mission statement there. We are viewing our true self as this boundless, compassionate awareness that we are. So it's interesting, this idea of searching for our true self, searching for that which we already are, right? That already is an interesting conundrum there. How is it that we have to search for what we already are? And so there's a lot of a lot of metaphors that point to this, a lot of models and systems that can inform this. And so a couple common metaphors that are used and that Stephen and I often use is that this boundless compassionate awareness is like the sky. And then that which we think of as ourselves, like our thoughts or our body or our emotions, those ways that we identify that tend to obscure that essence of who we are as boundless, compassionate awareness are like clouds passing through the sky. And we tend to identify with the clouds and fail to see the sky within which they appear. Just like we tend to identify with the contents of our consciousness, with what we think, with our memories, our beliefs, with our body, rather than with the consciousness within which these are known, within which experience arises. And so another metaphor that is often used is that we tend to identify with the waves of experience and not with the ocean of awareness, which is inseparable from the waves. But we tend to get kind of limited in our perspective so that we're just focused on the little movements of the waves and thinking that defines who we are. So Stephen and I have been leading this series for one of our meditation groups on the book No Bad Parts, which is the manual, so to speak, for internal family systems therapy. And that really gives us a wonderful model for talking about this self, which we are, and also these parts of our personality that we tend to identify with that obscure knowing ourselves as that vast, boundless awareness. And so Richard Schwartz, who developed IFS about 40 years ago, this has a wonderful way of working with the self and with those identifications that obscure us from recognizing and realizing that vast, boundless self that we are. And so just a little bit about the IFS model, and then I think that'll lead us into a little discussion, Stephen. The IFS model basically has this map of who we are as these different parts of our personality that we are born with, parts that are both legacies that we inherit, cultural legacies, and also just kind of the natural structure of personality that is divided into different parts. And when we are young and we have experiences that overwhelm us, maybe that traumatize us, we tend to, a young part of us tends to take on the burden of that and hold the burden of that emotion that was too much to handle at that time, and tends to hold on to that. And then there's another part that comes in and tries to protect that young part and develops this internal family of parts that react to those traumas and those overwhelming experiences that we have. And so we end up with this internal family of parts, which are all each playing a role in trying to protect us, in trying to guard our vulnerability. And that whole play of internal selves blocks us from having access to this boundless, compassionate awareness that we are. And so internal family systems has a wonderful way of helping us go in and identify in the triggers and traumas of our life, the reactions of our life, identify that play of parts within us. So those protectors that try to manage our life so that we don't get triggered, and then what's called firefighters that try to take us away from feeling those deep vulnerabilities inside. And so it's really a fascinating system of learning how to identify the parts within us that we tend to think of as who we are, say, as maybe a young one who is afraid of being in the world, or feels like an outcast, or feels like they don't belong. And then other parts that are really good at managing our lives. And then other parts that tend to take us away into addictions. And all of this play of parts obscures us from recognizing this deep ground of inner peace and boundless awareness that we are. So, Stephen, I think you've been working a lot with clients in terms of using this kind of dialogue with inner parts and opening space to dialogue with the parts as a way of accessing this awareness that we are. So I'll pass it to you to talk a little about some specific experiences that you've had.
Kevin, thank you, and love and blessings to everybody as you listen to this. And Kevin, I always engage in this as a very much a dialogue, because we want you to experience this as you're listening to us. So I do see a lot of clients these days, and a lot of wonderful families all over the world. And there is no doubt that all of us get pulled in by life and feel at any point that we're in one part more than another part. We're in a role as a parent, or we're in a role as a leader in a business, or we're then as a lover or a partner, and we're constantly checking in and actually acting out in a way these various parts. And that can get very overwhelming, especially if you are engaged in many of these accompanied by stress, because you might go from a work environment, which is very triggering and brings up a lot of resistance in you, and a part that wants to fight at work, and it finds itself that it's coming up again and again. And then you get home and you bring that same kind of energy into your home, and you're having fights with your partner. And sometimes it can be over the simplest things, like it could be school and education of your children, or just the way your partner reacts or doesn't react to an untidy house, or to some kind of chore that you're doing at home that neither of you likes doing. So there's all these ways that these parts come up, and quite often are carrying over energy, either from your workday, for example, or from your childhood. And all of that tends to get mixed in. And so there's not a lot of differentiating. We don't actually know the parts, so we haven't developed a relationship with them, or they've been suppressed, or they've been put aside until a later time, or there is just advice and opinions from lots of people around us that part's no good, or that part shouldn't be expressed, or especially if that part gets pretty angry from childhood because of some childhood trauma. And then you're told all the way along by teachers or by parents or by relatives, that they don't want to see that part. That part's ugly, or that part's
Or
really
anger is
not
bad,
acceptable.
right?
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. The anger is bad is a really crucial part of this whole process of part, because the parts themselves, when they're not expressed, given, at an early age, and they're not allowed to have their space or have their breath, take their breath like every other part, they feel like they've been kept inside in a container. People will often react and say, oh, look, I don't want to do that. It's hard to breathe when I get into anger, or feel suffocating when I even start to approach some of my grief, or I've had this trauma as a child, and when I even think about going there, it's just fear, or I'm scared. So all of those parts and all of the relationship to our parts can be very contracting and very restrictive. So finding those parts in your body, and getting really curious about what they're doing there and how they interact in your day is a really crucial step. And it's also can be, as I've found with many of the wonderful souls that I'm dealing with, Kevin, that it can be a really uncomfortable part, because suddenly you're connecting with some aspect of life. And I'll even go so far as to say present life and past life, because I've had a lot of experience where my past life self comes up. But that's another story. So if we keep it fairly
That's another
simple,
podcast.
that's
Yeah.
another
But
podcast.
in this life, we can kind of know that a part is up often because the emotion is out of proportion to the present situation.
Right.
Right. It has this energy built up from the past that is kind of flooding into our interactions now.
Exactly. And what often happens, like you said, is that all the energy and emotions from that past, let's say from your childhood, up till now, those parts inside you don't actually really know you, because they've been interacting with other parts inside you, and they're still at the level, so to speak, of being a young child. And they're still in a very undeveloped emotional state. So because they haven't been allowed to express themselves, they've been told by a parent or a teacher, it's not appropriate, or I don't want you to be like that, or oh, it's horrifying the way you react to things, or isn't it terrible? There's lots of these words that accompany this, and of course the feelings that go along with that, especially if one or another of your parents or caregivers or teachers has been particularly heavy emotionally on you, then the parts that are remaining inside you, they don't know how to relate. There's no skillful relating on any level. So as you're getting to know those parts better, those parts that have been inside you for such a long time, you suddenly become aware that that first encounter can be quite dramatic, can be, as I mentioned, it can be a little scary or a little bit uncomfortable or very uncomfortable. And so it's really crucial at that exact point, and this is what we're going to go into now. So I'm going to hand back to you in a second about dialogue, but this is where it's really important to start to speak to your parts, to actually start to get curious, let them know that you're here to look after that, as it were, that little child inside of yourself. Ask them maybe what age they are, or what they're feeling, or let them know that they're not on their own anymore, and then see how they react to that. Sometimes I've found with, some of the souls that I'm working with, a child might appear like a very depressed, sad child, could be one example. And so I ask the person to engage in a dialogue with what I'll call their child of sadness, or their child of anxiety, or their child of despair, or their child of fear, or the child that's really scared of even coming out. And quite often you can feel that somatically as it feels like a heavy sadness or a heavy anxiety that you've been carrying for a long time, and you wonder where that's arising from. And so it's important at that point just simply to stay curious, let them know that, let your inner part know that you're absolutely there for them, and don't try to push it too fast. Be very patient. Ask them to, look at you, engage with you, speak to you. So maybe you've got some thoughts or insights, Kevin, on some of the ways we can have a healthy dialogue, and perhaps some of the questions that we could ask that would make that interaction easier, especially in those early stages.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think all of us can probably relate to that feeling that maybe there's a part inside that feels outcast or unworthy, or not enough, or afraid or anxious in the world, and so on. But what can make it tricky is that since we don't want to feel that, since our psyche can't operate that way in the world, we will then have these protectors which are blocking us from feeling that young, vulnerable self. And so a lot of times we're really not in touch with that, and able to dialogue at first with that young, vulnerable part of us, because we have this inner critic or this inner manager that is kind of layered over that and protecting us from that vulnerability, so we don't feel it as we're going around in the world, because it would be overwhelming to feel that as we're walking around in the world, and we couldn't relate. So we all tend to have these protective parts overlaid, which will kind of tamp down that energy, or protect us from being triggered, or hold certain beliefs about who we are that make sure that we don't get in a triggering situation, like telling us. I often tell this story of when I was little and I had traumatic experiences with public speaking and being on stage. And then, so I had a protector come in over that and just tell me, well, you're just not good at that. Okay, that's for other people. And I'm going to make sure that you never put yourself in a situation where you have to do that. And so through much of my growing up in early adult life, I would not put myself in any situations where I had to express myself in a public speaking situation. There was a protector, a manager, managing my life, telling me I wasn't good at that, I wasn't suited for that, so just avoid that. So at first, and Richard Schwartz and IFS is really good at identifying this, at first what we often need to do is identify these protectors inside, identify the ones that are keeping that vulnerable part safe underneath, but doing it in a way that really limits us, or even can be self-destructive. So these protective parts can be, make sure we just stay safe, or once we are triggered, they could be these firefighters who just take us off into addiction and just numb the feelings. So we have these different kinds of protectors that we need to talk to first. So how do we do that? So when we're experiencing any tension in a specific triggering situation in our life, if we can identify where that tension is in our body, right? So feel into, so you might do that now, is just call to mind a triggering situation in your life, maybe with your finances or your work or relationships or your health, something that is a current tension in your life. And just feel into that tension. You might even notice what's a common thought you have about that area of your life, like finances, maybe nothing ever works out for me, or um, money is just for those other people over there, or money is bad, right? We have all kinds of kind of overlays around a vulnerability that kind of keep it tamped down. So if we can just feel into, notice a common tension producing thought in this area of our life, and just ask that part why it feels like it needs to say that to you. Why does that part inside, that protective part, keep telling you that money is a bad thing, having money is a bad thing? Those people who have money, those are superficial people, those are bad people, right? Whatever the thought is, we have a variety of beliefs around these points of tension in our life. So if we can just ask that part of us who's holding that belief, well, why are you saying that? What is that doing for you inside? And just not fill it in with our heads, but allow that part of us that's holding that thought to speak and tell us why it's saying that. Tell us why it's holding that belief and holding on to it so strongly. And so that's an entry point, is just notice. And then you might notice there's other parts of you that react to that belief. Like, well, I want money, right? Or you might find there's a whole interplay of different parts who have different conflicting beliefs that are battling within you around the issue of money. And so in IFS, you're just going inside and inquiring and dialoguing with these different parts of you, allowing them to get to know each other. And if there are any strong aversive reactions, just seeing if that part that has such a strong pushback will just step back just a little bit and give you a little bit of space to get to know all these parts that are interacting around money. So that's an entry point, so to speak, is just dialoguing with the different parts that are having a battle over these points of tension in your life, and just getting them to relax back just a little bit so that you, as this deeper self, can dialogue with them, get to know them, and they can get to know each other.
Beautifully said, Kevin. Beautifully said. And I think at that point, I'm just going to pick that point up briefly, that as you have this dialogue, and this is what I've found again and again with these great souls who come for guidance and advice, that as you begin that dialogue, really what you're starting to do is you're actually checking in with parts of yourself that haven't had a lot of attention for a long time. So in fact, the mere aspect of giving dialogue, just as Kevin's been sharing, actually opens a space. It opens a space that in fact wasn't there before. So it opens the space for dialogue. Now, this is the key, because what you're doing is you're opening space for something new. And people have often said, oh, but what's all this? Why am I dialoguing with a part? like that. And I often ask, so have you ever had a dialogue with your parts? Have you even recognized that one? And they say, no, this is something entirely new. And I said, exactly. You're actually opening space. Now, when you get that, if you're listening and you suddenly realize, oh, I haven't done that before, I'll be open to that. I'll be curious about it. The mere openness, the actual act of openness is what you're looking for here, because what happens then is that you're opening space to invite other parts to actually come and dialogue. So once you actually, get the gist of it, so to speak, once you realize that when you're opening to a new way of communicating, that you are in fact opening, you're opening consciousness, you're opening awareness to something brand new, then other parts will come forward. You might find that other thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, impulses, they all come up. They come up quite naturally. And you'll say, oh, that's interesting. What's that? I was doing that the other day when Kevin was guiding, and a really unique sensation came up. And it's often quite embodied. So it doesn't have to be a specific thought. You can often feel something in your body and think, oh, that's wonderful. That's a new feeling. So what you're getting to do is you're getting to know the different feelings and sensations and thoughts and emotions that exist around different parts as you invite them to participate. And so again, this is opening, right? First, you're opening to the possibility of dialogue. Then you're opening to the possibility of new parts arising and new feelings and sensations. And once you do that, you're going to notice a really distinct or palpable shift in your body. There'll actually be something, a sense of more spaciousness, because I'm emphasizing again and again, be open to dialogue, be open to new parts arising, be open to new sensations. So in fact, as you do that, there's more openness and spaciousness and more peace inside. And something really, I'll use the word magical, starts to happen, because in fact, you're starting to, by bringing more dialogue, by being open to new parts arising, by being open to some space or some peace around those parts, you'll find that an actual more embodied and spacious sense of peace arises. You'll actually feel that in your body. You'll actually feel into the qualities of what it feels like to be in the place of spaciousness, openness, and peace all the time.
Which is your true self.
That's exactly right. And so, Kevin, you might like to take us, out, so to speak, with a gentle guidance into feeling that spaciousness and openness and peace, because that is exactly, this podcast is directing you gently towards staying open to dialogue, staying open to new parts, staying then open to the arising of spaciousness and peace, which is your true self.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, it's that very openness, as you said, that very sense of spaciousness that you discover, you realize, you recognize as these parts, just as you're allowing these parts to have space around them, you realize you are that space. You are that openness. That is the essence of who you are. You are an open space of awareness within which the play of experiences, the play of parts happens. So let's just have a brief practice, just kind of pointing to that, as you said. So if you want to just lightly close your eyes, and you could just call to mind some tension or issue in your life. Maybe it is around finances, around money, or around health, around relationships. Those are some common ones. And just notice where that tension is in your body. So call to mind maybe a specific instance of that tension. And notice where you feel that tension in your body. So again, you're just being open to feeling inside your body or even around your body, your energy field. Noticing where that tension resides. It might be in your gut, in your abdomen, or in your throat, or your back, your forehead. Just notice around your heart. Where is that tension? Once you locate it, just see if there's any quality to that tension. Like, is it thick or sticky or like a rock, or what is the sensory quality of it? Just feeling it, being open to it. And then tuning into that area, that tension, and allowing it to speak to you. Just being open to allowing something to arise, allowing an expression to arise from it. So what does that tension want to tell you? Why is that tension here? And just notice anything that arises. Again, with curiosity and openness, not trying to fill in an answer from your mind, just letting that area in your body, that tension, speak. So it may speak to you a belief that it's holding, or a fear. Just noticing, just allowing that, maintaining curiosity and openness, giving it room to breathe and speak. Maybe even taking a deep breath. Letting go, letting some of that tension go. What does that tension want you to know? It's here for a reason. It has energy and information for you. And rather than pushing it away or grabbing onto it, you're just open and allowing, curious, compassionate. So if it was a hard voice, like an inner critic, you're just welcoming it to speak. If it was a timid voice, you're giving it space and permission to speak. And if they're different voices, you're just asking them to give each other space to dialogue, to open up. And notice now this quality of openness, this quality of being a greater space within which this dialogue is happening. Being a space that's beyond your body. Your body is happening in this space. All your thoughts, feelings, and parts are happening in this greater space that you are. You are this open space of awareness. So as you rest as this open, boundless, compassionate awareness, just before we wrap this short session up, just ask this tension if it has any message for you. Anything it would like you to do. Any way to move forward in this area of your life. And then notice that quality of openness and spaciousness. This is the essence of who you are. You are this open space of experience. Always peaceful, curious, open, compassionate. Underneath all this play of parts, this play of experiences, you are that. You are that open space of experience. You no longer have to search for who you are. You are the one. That open space within which every experience of your life is happening. And as you get to know this open space and allow the different thoughts, feelings, the different parts of your personality to play in this space, to be free to move and speak and express. Transforms how you relate to yourself and others. Opens the possible compassionate awareness. So now very slowly begin to open your eyes. Taking the feeling of this open space all around you, together with the open space inside, as one space of boundless, compassionate awareness. You are that. Thank you, Stephen, for this discussion, for your presence. Thank you all for participating with us. And if you'd like more information on meditation and awareness practices like this, including subtle energy meditation and the ROV meditation app and our online courses and practice groups, you can visit us at raisingourvibration.net. And we'd love to hear from you there. There's links to email us there as well. So until next time, bye for now. Love and blessings.